Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Marcus Thorne built an empire on manipulation and control, with his wife Eleanor silently shaping his success. However, when Marcus publicly humiliates her for his mistress, Isabella, Eleanor's hidden strength emerges. She uses her intellect and the leverage of her architectural patents to bring Marcus's empire to its knees. Partnering with Gabriel Vance, a former rival, Eleanor plots a strategic takeover, reclaiming her power and building a future on her own terms. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and a woman reclaiming what was always hers. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. A tale of deceit, pride, and the steep cost of arrogance. Get ready for a story that will send shivers down your spine. If you enjoy suspense and drama, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. Now, let's dive into the beginning of a pivotal moment that will change everything. Above the scene hung the grand crystal chandelier, its brilliance a galaxy of shimmering light. Marcus Thorne, the mastermind behind an empire built on boldness and manipulation, stood between two women. To his left was Eleanor, his wife, the quiet architect of his life, her presence a subtle yet firm contrast to the chaos around her. On his right stood Isabella Vance, draped in a fiery red silk gown. Her smile was sharp, a weapon that matched her eyes, filled with quiet challenge. The room, thick with tension, felt like an impending storm. The mingling scent of expensive perfume clashed with a more dangerous undertone of venom. Then came the sound. A slap so brutal it sliced through the air. The world seemed to freeze. Marcus had made his choice, and in that single violent moment, he destroyed not only his promise, but set the stage for a cataclysm that would shake the very foundation of his world. The annual gala hosted by the Thorne Foundation was the city's social highlight. Held at the Grand Ballroom of the London Majestic Hotel, it was an event meticulously crafted by Marcus with the same ruthless precision that governed his business, Thorne Innovations. But tonight, it was not about charity. It was a battle for control, a show of power. Every guest was either a pawn or an observer. Marcus, dressed in a sharp Tom Ford tuxedo, moved through the crowd with calculated ease, his smile wide but his eyes never missing a detail. Eleanor, at his side, was the picture of grace, her presence dignified but overshadowed by the underlying tension. She wore a navy blue gown that mirrored her quiet strength, a reflection of the precision with which she had shaped their life. She had designed not only their home and their business, but the very rhythm of their existence. And yet, her role had always been invisible, an essential part of Marcus's image, but one he never fully acknowledged. But in the past year, cracks had begun to form in the foundation she had so carefully laid. Isabella Vance was the cause. A woman who was everything Eleanor was not, loud, brash, and craving attention. A social media influencer who documented every lavish gift from Marcus, every extravagant vacation. Isabella was his rebellion, his statement of power, and tonight, she broke an unspoken rule. No longer just a rumor, she was here in person, sitting at his wife's table in a red Valentino gown that demanded all eyes. She sat across from Eleanor, her gaze challenging, as though daring Eleanor to take notice. Marcus, clearly enjoying the chaos, placed Isabella at his right side, an honor that signaled his public disavowal of his wife. Eleanor, his wife of 12 years, sat at his left, a deliberate slight. She maintained composure, her back straight, her face an unreadable mask. She exchanged pleasantries with the guests next to her, speaking of art with Mr. Collins and urban planning with a city councilwoman. But she could feel Isabella's smirk, could see the possessive hand Marcus placed on his mistress's arm. She caught the pitying glances from old friends, the whispers of his rivals. Their table was a boiling pot of unspoken tension in a sea of false civility. The explosion came during dessert. Marcus, having indulged in a few too many glasses of cava, was regaling the table with a story about a recent hostile takeover. "You have to be ruthless," he boomed. "You see something you want and you take it. No hesitation. Hesitation is death." He squeezed Isabella's shoulder as their eyes met, an unspoken understanding shared between them. Emboldened, Isabella leaned in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Marcus knows exactly what he wants," she purred, her words aimed straight at Eleanor. "He's not a man who settles for antiques." A gasp rippled around the table. The insult was so sharp, so direct, that it left everyone stunned. The city councilwoman stared at the ceiling, trying to pretend she hadn't heard. Eleanor, however, kept her cool. She didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She simply turned her head slowly, her icy gray eyes locking onto her husband. Marcus, she said quietly, her voice steady but cutting. "I think your guest has had too much to drink. Perhaps it's time for her to leave." The challenge was subtle, but it was enough to force Marcus's hand. He was faced with a choice: honor his wife's dignity or feed his mistress's ego. Marcus's face darkened, the flush of alcohol making him bolder. Isabella, sensing the tension, feigned distress, placing a hand on his chest. "Marcus, are you being so cruel to me?" she whimpered. "I didn't mean it. You and your damn Ice Queen act." Marcus's gaze shifted to Eleanor, his eyes narrowing with contempt. "You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you? Always standing there judging me, judging her." His voice rose, filled with venom. "I'm asking you, as your wife, to maintain some decency in public," Eleanor said, her voice trembling slightly but her gaze unwavering. "My wife?" Marcus laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. "You're a contract, a piece of furniture. Don't you dare tell me what to do." He stood abruptly, looming over her, and the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Isabella's smile widened in triumph. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the final public humiliation that would shatter what remained of Eleanor's dignity. Eleanor, however, was done playing the role of the silent victim. Her anger, carefully controlled for so long, finally bubbled to the surface. "Don't speak to me like that, Marcus," she warned. "Not here. Not ever." "I'll speak however I damn well please," he snarled. To please Isabella, to assert his dominance, and to break the last shred of Eleanor's composure. He did something unimaginable. He raised his hand. The slap echoed through the room. It was loud, sharp, and deeply humiliating. Gasps filled the air. Eleanor reeled, not from pain but from the sheer shock of it. She looked up at Marcus, expecting to see something: regret, guilt, or even remorse. But all she saw was cold satisfaction in his eyes. He looked to Isabella, who gave him a nod of approval, but Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't even speak. Her eyes, once filled with fire, were now vacant. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate, her back straight, and walked out of the room without a word. She left the shattered remnants of her life behind. Outside, the night air hit her burning cheek like a shock. A young valet rushed to her side, his face full of concern. "Mrs. Thorne, are you okay? Can I get your car?" Eleanor nodded, the effort to speak feeling like an insurmountable task. She didn't head for the sterile, minimalist penthouse she shared with Marcus. Instead, she drove aimlessly through the city, the hum of her car the only sound in the silence that now enveloped her. The slap wasn't just an act of violence, it was the final confirmation of something she had known deep down for years. Marcus didn't just disrespect her, he despised her. He had used her, belittled her, and now she was finally free. An hour later, she found herself standing in front of Thorne Tower, the place where her life had once been built. But instead of entering through the grand lobby, she used a private access card to bypass the doorman and took the service elevator to the penthouse. She walked past the possessions he had once gifted her: designer clothes, a safe full of jewelry, all symbols of his control. But she ignored them. She headed straight for her office, where a framed draft of Thorne Innovations hung on the wall. It was her work, her design. But Marcus had stolen the credit. She opened a hidden safe in the wall, not for jewelry, but for her intellectual property. Inside were the blueprints, the patents, and the key to her future. The prenuptial agreement she had signed years ago contained a clause that would protect her creations, even from Marcus. With a calm resolve, Eleanor packed a small suitcase and left the penthouse, never looking back. As she walked past their wedding photo on the mantel, she picked up the frame, walked to the trash chute, and dropped it. The sound of it clattering to the ground below felt oddly freeing. Eleanor drove away, leaving behind the life Marcus had built with her sacrifice. She was done being his possession. It was time for her to reclaim everything that was hers. He had forgotten that an architect knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are, and she knew with absolute certainty how to make his entire structure come crashing down. Eleanor drove for nearly an hour, leaving the city's polished, opulent heart for the rougher, more vibrant arts district. She pulled up on a quiet side street lined with converted warehouses and old brick buildings in front of a discreet iron gate. Using an old key, she unlocked it and drove into a small private courtyard. Here stood a 3-story brick building, a former textile factory she had bought for a pittance in her 20s, long before Marcus. It was her first solo project. She had converted the top floor into a residential loft for herself and rented the 2 lower floors to artists and artisans. When she married Marcus, she'd moved out, but she never sold it. It was her secret foothold, a piece of her past she had refused to give up. The loft was just as she had left it, covered in a thin layer of dust. It was the antithesis of the penthouse, warm with exposed brick walls, old wooden beams, and bookshelves overflowing with books on art history and engineering. A huge drafting table, its surface marked with the ghosts of 1,000 designs, stood by the arched window, overlooking the city skyline from a different, more humble perspective. This place was her. It smelled of old paper, turpentine and dust, the smell of creation. She dropped her small suitcase, the sound echoing in the quiet space. For the first time since the slap, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of the night. A single hot tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of release. She was shedding a skin, a life, a name. Here she was not Mrs. Thorne, she was Eleanor. She spent the first few hours in a daze of activity. She opened the windows, letting the cool night air chase away the stillness. She brewed a pot of strong black tea, the ritual anchoring her. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at her old drafting table, her fingers tracing the nicks and grooves in the wood. She had once designed her future here. She would do it again. She opened the leather portfolio, spreading the patents and blueprints across the table under the warm glow of a lamp. She studied the intricate details of the Thorne Innovations headquarters, the building that was the physical heart of Marcus's empire. She knew all its secrets, all its strengths, and all its vulnerabilities. Marcus saw it as a symbol of his power. She saw it as a complex system of interconnected dependencies, and she knew exactly which one to pull to make it all come crashing down. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city was waking up, oblivious to the war that was about to begin. With the morning light came a renewed sense of purpose. Eleanor picked up her phone. It was flooded with frantic missed calls and messages from Marcus, from worried friends, from her mother. She ignored them all. She scrolled through her contacts to a name she hadn't called in almost 5 years. The contact was listed simply as Gabe. She checked the time. It would be late afternoon in London. She pressed the call button. It rang 3 times before a deep, calm voice answered. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" There was no surprise, just a thread of immediate concern. Gabriel Vance. They had been rivals and friends at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, the 2 brightest stars in their graduating class. He was brilliant, fiercely competitive, but always fair. He had respected her talent more than anyone, even more than Marcus. While she had withdrawn to build Marcus's world, Gabriel had gone on to create his own empire. Consinkayed Global was now one of the largest and most innovative real estate development and investment firms in the world. A giant that made Thorne Innovations look like a provincial startup. They had stayed in touch sporadically. A Christmas card here, a congratulatory email there. But a deep and unspoken professional respect always remained. "Gabriel," she said, her voice firmer than she expected, "I need your help. Or rather, I have a business proposal for you." There was a pause on the line. "I'm listening," he said, his tone shifting from personal concern to professional sharpness. Eleanor took a deep breath. "I'm leaving Marcus," she stated, the words solidifying the decision. "It's become untenable." She didn't elaborate on the events of the previous night. There was no need. Gabriel was smart enough to read between the lines. "I'm sorry to hear that, Eleanor." "I truly am," he said, his voice laced with genuine sympathy. "What's the proposal?" "Thorne Innovations. Its headquarters. The insignia building on Park Lane," she began, her voice gaining the familiar strength of her profession. "As you know, I was the lead architect. What you don't know is that I hold the exclusive intellectual property patents for the building's core structural systems and its patented energy-efficient curtain wall. Under a clause in my prenuptial agreement, those rights are mine alone. Non-transferable." She could almost hear the gears turning in Gabriel's mind 1,000 miles away. "That's an incredible oversight on his part," he murmured, a note of admiration in his voice. "Marcus's arrogance has always been his greatest liability," Eleanor said coolly. "He saw my work as his property, just as he saw me, and never read the fine print. The licensing agreement for Thorne Innovations' use of my patents was contingent upon the continuation of our marriage, and my role within the company, a role he effectively eliminated last night. So technically," Gabriel deduced, his voice quickening with excitement, "Thorne Innovations is currently in massive multi-million-dollar patent infringement. It's operating illegally in a building it has no right to use." "Precisely." Eleanor confirmed a lawsuit would freeze their operations. The public relations fallout would be catastrophic. The stock price would plummet. It would be a death blow. "You want to sue him into oblivion?" Gabriel stated. "No," Eleanor corrected him. "That's Marcus's way. Brute force. I have a more elegant design. I don't just want to destroy him. I want to build something new from the wreckage. This is where you come in." Kincaid Global has been looking to expand its tech portfolio and establish a stronger presence in London, Gabriel mused. He fell silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was charged with energy. You're not just offering me a lawsuit. You're offering me leverage for a hostile takeover with you as the fulcrum. I'm offering you the keys to the kingdom, Gabriel. She said, Thorn Innovations at a deep discount with its greatest liability transformed into its greatest asset. I want a seat on the new board. I want to head a new division of sustainable architectural design funded by the acquisition. I want to build my own legacy, not just be a footnote in his. The line went silent again. Eleanor waited, her heart pounding. This was the biggest gamble of her life. When do you plan to make your move? Gabriel finally asked. Today, Eleanor replied without hesitation. Marcus thinks I'm hiding, broken, and crying. He's about to find out what a woman with nothing to lose is capable of. Book my flight, Gabriel Vance said. I'll be on the next plane from London. And Eleanor, welcome back. When she hung up the phone, the sun was fully over the horizon. Eleanor looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the window. The ghost of a bruise was beginning to form on her cheek, a faint purple shadow. It wasn't a mark of shame. It was a battle scar. The war had begun. While Eleanor was rediscovering her strength, Marcus Thorne was waking up in a world he believed he still controlled. He awoke in their penthouse, the sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A brutal headache pounded behind his eyes. The space next to him in the king-sized bed was cold and empty. He grunted. A flicker of annoyance passed over him before being replaced by a surge of self-righteousness. She deserved it. She had embarrassed him. She had challenged him in front of his friends, his partners, and most importantly, in front of Isabella. He had simply put her back in her place. He grabbed his phone, expecting a string of apologetic texts of pleas for forgiveness. Instead, there were only the frantic, unanswered messages he had sent in a drunken state after returning from the gala. A wave of fury washed over him. The audacity of her to not come crawling back. His phone rang and Isabella's photo came up on the screen. He answered, his voice a low growl. What, morning, my tiger? Isabella purred, her voice clawingly sweet. Is the Ice Queen still hiding in her room? She's gone, Marcus snapped. She packed a suitcase and left. Oh no, the poor thing, Isabella said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Well, don't you worry. It's for the best. You're free now. We can finally be together properly. No more hiding. She paused, then added, I'm on my way over. I'll make you breakfast. We should celebrate your liberation. An hour later, Isabella was flitting around his kitchen, wearing one of his expensive dress shirts and nothing else, trying to cook omelets. The smell of burnt butter filled the air. Marcus sat on the marble island, drinking a strong black coffee, trying to ignore the disc gnawing at his stomach. Don't you worry about her, Dagito, Isabella said, sliding a slightly burnt omelet onto a plate. Where's she going to go? Back to her mother's. She has nothing without you. The credit cards, the house, the car, it's all in your name. She'll be back in a day or two, tail between her legs. This soothed his ego. Isabella was right. Eleanor was a creature of comfort and luxury. She couldn't survive without the world he provided. He had made her, and he could unmake her. I'm having my lawyer, Roberto, freeze her accounts today, Marcus declared, taking a vengeful bite of the omelet just to speed things up. That's my ruthless CEO, Isabella purred, kissing his cheek. Now about today, I was thinking we could go shopping. I saw the most divine diamond necklace at Tiffany & Company as a gift of freedom. Marcus's mood lifted. This was what he wanted, a beautiful, adoring woman who knew her place, who appreciated the things he could give her. He spent the morning indulging Isabella, buying the necklace, and several other extravagant items, the transactional nature of their relationship, a comforting balm to his wounded pride. He was in control. He was the king. He returned to his office at the Thorn Innovations headquarters in the early afternoon, feeling powerful and vindicated. His secretary, a nervous young man named John, met him with a stack of messages. Good afternoon, Mr. Thorne. Your lawyer, Mrs. Almagro, called. She said it was urgent. Marcus scoffed. Tell her to leave a message. Eleanor is probably trying to negotiate her allowance. Pathetic. He walked into his magnificent corner office, a room with a panoramic view of the city, a view Eleanor had specifically designed to make him feel like a titan. He sat in his leather chair and tried to log on to the company's central server to review Q3 financials. Access denied. He frowned and tried again. Access denied. User privileges revoked by system administrator. What the hell? He muttered. He buzzed John, I can't access the server. What's going on? I don't know, sir, John stammered. The entire executive suite is locked out. It's chaos. But they said the lockout is tied to the building's main operating system, not the company's network. It's some kind of architectural protocol. They said, Only the original architect of the system has the master key. A cold dread began to seep into Marcus's bones. Architectural protocol. Original architect of the system. Eleanor, his private line rang. It was Roberto Fernandez, his head of legal counsel. Marcus, we have a problem, Roberto said, his voice tight. A big one. I just got off the phone with Evelyn Almagro. She's representing your wife. So what? She wants the house. She can have it. I'll buy a bigger one. Marcus blustered. It's not about the house, Marcus. It's about the company. It's about this building. It's about everything. She's invoking the intellectual and creative property clause in your prenuptial agreement. Marcus's mind went blank. The what? What the hell is that? Roberto sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. It's Addendum 4, Section B. You signed it 12 years ago. It stipulates that all of Eleanor's architectural patents and designs remain her exclusive property. The licensing agreement for Thorn Innovations' use of them was contingent upon the marriage being intact. Almagrois claiming your actions last night constituted a material breach of contract, which terminates the agreement. Effective. Immediately, the phone felt slick in Marcus's hand. The panoramic view suddenly felt like it was closing in on him. What does that mean, Roberto? In layman's terms, Roberto said, his voice grim. It means as of this moment, Thorn Innovations is illegally occupying its own headquarters. Every minute we are in this building, we are accruing millions in patent infringement damages. She can file an injunction that could shut down all of our physical operations by the end of the day. She holds the company's kill switch, Marcus, and her fingers on the button. Marcus limped to his feet. A choked roar of disbelief and fury caught in his throat. He looked around his office, the sleek desk, the powerful computer, the view of his city. It was all built on a foundation that was now being pulled out from under him. That's impossible, he yelled into the phone. She can't do that. She wouldn't dare. But even as he said it, he knew he was wrong. He saw her face from the night before, her eyes empty of fear, of love, of anything he recognized. He had slapped a queen, thinking she was a pawn, and now the board was being flipped, and all his pieces were about to be swept away. His celebration was over. The bill had just begun. The lobby of the Thorn Innovations headquarters was a cathedral of modern commerce. A 50-foot atrium of glass and Italian white marble was designed to inspire equal parts awe and intimidation. It was Eleanor's design, and today she had come back to claim it. At 2 p.m. on the dot, the revolving glass doors opened and Eleanor Thorn walked in. She was not the same woman who had exited the gala the night before. The high society wife, elegant but submissive, was gone. In her place stood a formidable professional. She wore a charcoal gray pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a severe and elegant bun. Her face was pale and serene. The faint bruise on her cheek was visible, not as a mark of victimhood, but as a stark and defiant accusation. She was not alone. At her flanks were two figures who immediately caught the attention of the security guards. To her right was Evelyn Almagro, her lawyer, a woman in her 60s with a penetrating intelligence in Hearies and a briefcase full of legal dynamite. To her left were two uniformed police officers, their presence a silent and impactful statement. The receptionist, a young woman named Ava, looked up. Her eyes widened with recognition and then with confusion. "Mrs. Thorn, can I help you?" "I'm here to see my husband, Marcus Thorn," Eleanor said, her voice quiet and resonant in the vast space. "And I will not take no for an answer." The head of security, a burly ex-cop named Frank, hustled over, his expression a mix of professional duty and unease. "Mrs. Thorn, is there a problem?" "The police. The police are with me." "Frank," Evelyn Almagro interjected smoothly, producing a file. "This is a formal domestic assault complaint filed by my client against her husband, Marcus Thorn, for his actions last night at the Majestic. They are here to take his statement." Frank's jaw tightened. He had worked for Marcus for years, but had always respected Eleanor. The news sent a shockwave through the lobby. Employees passing by stopped. Conversations became whispers, the rumor already circulating since the gala picked up speed. "I'll have to call upstairs," Frank stammered. "Do it," Eleanor said coolly. "Tell my husband his wife is here and she's brought guests up to the corner office." Marcus was in a full-blown panic. Roberto Fernandez's call had shattered his reality, and now his secretary John burst in, his face pale. "Mr. Thorn, it's your wife. She's in the lobby. She has the police with her." Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. The police? Why, the slap. He had barely registered it as anything more than a disciplinary action. The idea that it could have real legal consequences was something his privileged mind had never conceived. "Don't let her up," he roared, pacing his office like a caged animal. "Frank is to keep her in the lobby." "It's too late, sir," John squeaked. "Mrs. Almagro is citing shareholder access rights." and the police are citing a criminal complaint. They're on their way up. The chime of the private executive elevator rang down the hall. A death knell. Marcus's bluster evaporated, replaced by a primal fear. He looked wildly around the office, which was no longer truly his. His kingdom was being invaded. The double doors to his office suite swung open. Eleanor walked in first, her stride purposeful, her eyes scanning the room as if refamiliarizing herself with her own creation. Evelyn Elmagro and the two officers followed, their expressions grim and professional. "Marcus," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. "What is the meaning of this?" Marcus blustered, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Get these people out of my office. You can't just barge in here." "Actually, she can," Evelyn Almagro said, placing her briefcase on his large mahogany desk with a decisive thud. "As a 50% partner in the holding company that owns this property, she has every right to be here. As for the officers, they have a few questions for you regarding assault charges." One of the officers, a lean sergeant, stepped forward. "Mr. Thorne, we've received a credible report of an assault that took place last night. We'd like you to accompany us to the station to give a statement. This is ridiculous. It was a private marital dispute." Marcus spat, his face turning a mottled red. "A dispute that left a mark, Mr. Thorne," the lean sergeant said, his gaze flickering to Eleanor's cheek, "and had dozens of witnesses." But Marcus was trapped. The legal threat of the prenuptial agreement was abstract, financial, but this, the police, the uniform, the threat of handcuffs was real, immediate, and humiliating. He saw his mug shot on the front of the tabloids. The mug shot next to the headline, "Tech mogul arrested for battering wife." "This is blackmail," he snarled, pointing a shaking finger at Eleanor. "You want money? Is that it? Fine, name your price. How many millions do you want for all this to go away?" Eleanor almost smiled, a cold, bitter curve of her lips. "You still don't get it, do you, Marcus? You think everything can be bought? You think everyone has a price? I'm not here for your money. I'm here for what's mine." As if on cue, the elevator chimed again. All heads turned as the doors opened. A man stepped out, tall and immaculately dressed in a bespoke Savile rose suit. He radiated an aura of quiet, unshakable power that made Marcus's blustering dominance look cheap and theatrical. His face was serene, his eyes sharp and analytical. He walked toward the office, his gaze falling first on Eleanor, a gesture of profound respect and support passing between them. Then he turned his attention to the sputtering cornered man behind the desk. "Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice a smooth baritone with a slight British accent. "A pleasure to finally meet you. My name is Gabrielle Vance." The name hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Marcus knew the name. Everyone in the world of global finance and development knew the name. Consincade Global was Atatan, an industry-devouring leviathan. The realization hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. This was no longer a domestic dispute. This was no simple divorce. This was a corporate execution. And his wife, the woman he'd slapped and discarded, was holding the axe. The arrival of Gabriel Vance changed the atmosphere of the room from a tense confrontation to a strategic demolition. Marcus Thorne stared at him, his mind scrambling to process this catastrophic new variable. "Kincaid Global here." "Why, Vance?" Marcus stammered the name, which tasted like ash in his mouth. "What are you doing here?" Gabriel didn't answer him directly. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city. "Remarkable design, this building," he said, his voice conversational. "A perfect balance of form and function. The curtain wall system is particularly ingenious. It achieves a level of energy efficiency that frankly is a decade ahead of its time. I've followed the architect's work for years, a true visionary." He turned back. His gaze settled on Eleanor with undisguised admiration before finally looking at Marcus. "Of course, you know the architect intimately." The implication was clear, and it was a direct hit on Marcus's stolen credit. "Get to the point, Vance," Marcus snarled, feeling his power slip away with every passing second. "Very well," Gabriel said, his tone shifting to one of cold corporate precision. He gestured to Evelyn Almagro. "Mrs. Almagro, if you would." Evelyn opened her briefcase and placed two documents on Marcus's desk. "The first," she explained, "is a cease and desist order. It demands that Thorne Innovations immediately vacate these premises due to an ongoing willful patent infringement. As we speak, our associates are filing an emergency injunction with federal court to freeze all company assets pending a damages hearing. Our initial estimate of damages is in the realm of $2 billion, not including punitive measures." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. $2 billion. That would gut the company. It would be the end of everything. "The second document," Gabriel continued, stepping forward, "is an offer. A way out of this unfortunate situation." Marcus looked at the paper, his hands trembling. It was a term sheet, The letterhead was Concade Global. My firm, Concade Global, is prepared to make an offer to acquire a 51% controlling stake in Thorn Innovations. Gabriel stated, "The offer price is, I'm afraid, significantly below your current market valuation. In fact, it's 30 cents on the euro. A fire sale, you could say. Given that the value of your firm will evaporate the moment markets open tomorrow, and word of this injunction gets out, I consider it a very generous offer." It was a hostile takeover executed with surgical and brutal efficiency. Marcus had been checkmated. "You can't do this," he raged. "This is my company. I built it, did you?" Eleanor spoke for the first time since Gabriel's arrival. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through Marcus's bluster. "You had an idea, Marcus. A good one, I'll admit. But I designed the space where that idea grew. I created the environment that attracted the talent. I hosted the dinners, charmed the investors, and smoothed over your beastly impulses. You laid a few bricks, but I was the architect. And it seems you've forgotten the most important rule of construction. A weak foundation cannot support the weight of a skyscraper." She walked to the desk standing beside Gabriel, a united front. "Oh, and of course, conditions for this acquisition," Gabriel added smoothly. "Condition 1. All criminal and civil charges against you related to the events of last night will be settled immediately. Our legal team will draft an agreement, one so airtight you can never contest it. It will include a public apology. Condition 2, Gabriel continued, his eyes like chips of ice. You, Mr. Thorne, will be removed as CEO. You will retain a minority stake. You will have no operational control and no seat on the board. You will be given a meaningless title, founder and chief vision officer perhaps, and an office in the basement." Marcus looked as if he had been physically hit again, this time by Gabriel's words. The humiliation was absolute. "And the third and most important condition," Gabriel said, turning his gaze back to Eleanor. "Mrs. Thorne, or rather Miss Eleanor Vance, as she will be known professionally from now on, reclaiming her maiden name, will be appointed to the new board of directors. Furthermore, Concade Global will finance the creation of a new independent subsidiary under the Thorn Innovations umbrella. It will be called Vance Designs, and it will focus on sustainable architectural technology and smart city integration. Ms. Vance will be its president and CEO, with full autonomy and a budget that will make her a global leader in the field." The sheer audacity and brilliance of the plan left Marcus speechless. Not only were they taking his company, they were using its husk to build a new empire for Eleanor right in front of his eyes. He would be ghost haunting the halls of his own former kingdom, forced to watch daily as the wife he abused became more powerful and respected than he ever was. "This is insane," he whispered, slumping into his chair, the fight draining out of him. "It's business," Gabriel corrected him. "You of all people should understand that you once told your wife that in business you see what you want and you take it. No apologies, no hesitation. We are simply following your advice." The final piece of the play was yet to come. The office door swung open again. This time it wasn't a person who entered, but an interruption. Isabella Vance, dressed in Marcus's paid-for designer clothes, pranced in, oblivious to the corporate execution in progress. "Marcus, honey, I got bored waiting in the car," she began, and then she stopped, taking in the scene. The police officers, the grim-faced lawyer, the powerful stranger, and Eleanor, who looked not like a victim, but a conqueror. Isabella's finely tuned survival instincts went on high alert. The power balance in the room was palpable, and Marcus was on the losing side. Her eyes darted from Marcus' defeated slump to Gabriel Vance's expensive suit and confident posture. "What? What's going on?" she asked, her voice losing its seductive purr. Marcus looked at her, his last hope for an ally. "Isabella, tell them. Tell them it was nothing. A misunderstanding." Isabella looked at the term sheet on the desk, at the officers' faces, at the unbreakable expression on Eleanor's face. She saw her future, the money, the fame, the access evaporating. Her loyalty was not to Marcus the man, but to Marcus, the multimillionaire. A multimillionaire who was about to be well and truly demoted. She took a small step back away from Marcus, a subtle but definitive shift. "I don't know what he's talking about," she said, her voice small and trembling, playing the victim. "He was very aggressive last night. It was frightening. I think I'd like to speak with the officers in private." It was the final and perfect betrayal. The last nail in Marcus's coffin, hammered in by the very person he had sacrificed everything for. Marcus Thorne stared at her, his mouth agape, finally understanding the true nature of the world. He had built a world of transactions where loyalty was just another commodity to buy and sell, and today his stock was worthless. The silence that followed Isabella's defection was profound. It was the sound of a king being stripped of his crown, his robes, and his last ally in his own throne room. Marcus looked from Isabella's calculatingly fearful face to Gabriel's impassive one, and finally to Eleanor. In her eyes, he saw no triumph, no gloating. He saw only a calm, dispassionate finality, like an architect watching a completed demolition. The thinned sergeant, seeing his opening, stepped toward Isabella. "Ma'am, if you'd like to give a witness statement, we can take it right now." He positioned himself subtly between Isabella and Marcus, a clear signal that the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Marcus was no longer the untouchable titan. He was a suspect. Isabella, seeing her path to a new narrative, nodded eagerly. "Yes, I think I should." She was escorted out of the office, not even giving Marcus a sideways glance. Her story would be on every gossip blog by morning. The terrified mistress who witnessed the brutal nature of the mogul. She was already saving her own brand from the wreckage. Marcus was alone, utterly and completely alone, surrounded by the architects of his downfall. He deflated. The rage and bluster drained away to leave an empty man. He looked at Secondchances global term sheet. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender document. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow when markets open to sign," Gabriel said, his voice leaving no room for discussion. "If you sign, we'll spin this as a strategic merger, a bold new direction for Thorn Innovations. Our PR team is already drafting the press release. Your reputation, while damaged, can survive in some form. If you don't sign, Mrs. Almagro will file the injunction. The patent infringement lawsuit will go public. The assault charges will be pursued with the full weight of the law. Your company will be bankrupt by noon, and you will likely face jail time. The choice is yours." Marcus picked up a pen, his hand shaking so violently he could barely hold it. He looked at Eleanor one last time, a desperate, pathetic plea in his eyes. He was looking for a flicker of the woman who had once loved him, the partner who had supported him. He found nothing. "Why, Eleanor?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "After everything Igave you." Eleanor finally stepped toward him, her shadow falling over his desk. "That's your mistake, Marcus. You never gave me anything. You took my talent and called it yours. You took my support and called it your right. You took my love and ground it into dust. You didn't give me this life. You used my life to build yours. The things you bought me weren't gifts. They were wages. And your payments have stopped." She pointed at the papers. "This isn't revenge. It's a structural correction, a realignment. You built a flawed structure on a stolen foundation. I'm simply condemning the building and starting over with the original blueprints." With that, she turned her back on him. She had said everything she needed to say. There was nothing left but the paperwork. She walked with Gabriel and Evelyn toward the elevator. As the doors opened, she paused and looked back at the office, which was now a prisoner in a cage of his own design. She felt a strange sense of detachment, not of joy, but of peace. The heavy weight she had been carrying for years was finally gone. "Are you all right?" Gabriel asked quietly as the elevator doors closed, carrying them away from the scene of the demolition. Eleanor looked at her reflection in the polished steel doors. She saw the faint bruise on her cheek, but for the first time she also saw the woman she was meant to be. Strong, brilliant, and finally free. "Gabriel," she said, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "I'm just getting started." The next morning, the business world was rocked by a stunning announcement. Concentcade Global had acquired a controlling stake in Thorn Innovations. The press release, a masterpiece of corporate spin, spoke of a visionary partnership that positioned the move as a brilliant fusion of technology and sustainable development. It noted that Marcus Thorn would be stepping down as CEO to explore new creative ventures while the board welcomed a new member, the renowned architectural designer Eleanor Vance, who would head a new and exciting subsidiary. Vance Designs, the tabloids, meanwhile, had a different story. They ran photos of a haggard-looking Marcus, alongside quotes from a terrified Isabella Vance about his volatile temperament. The narrative was set. Marcus was out. A disgraced brute. Eleanor was in. A brilliant woman taking back her power. Weeks later, Eleanor found herself not in a sterile penthouse, but in the bustling creative chaos of her old loft in the Arts District, now the temporary headquarters of Vance Designs. Young, ambitious architects and engineers buzzed around her, their energy contagious. Her old drafting table was covered in new blueprints, plans for buildings that would not only scrape the sky, but heal the planet. Gabriel Vance stopped by with 2 cups of coffee. He was no longer just an investor. He was a partner, a collaborator, a friend. "The board approved your budget for the Barcelona project," he said, handing her a cup unanimously. "They would be fools not to," she replied with a confident smile, her eyes twinkling with ideas. She looked out the large arched window at the city skyline. Among the towers, the Thorn Innovations headquarters still stood, a monument to her past. But now it was just one building among many. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, at the empty spaces where new things could be built. She had torn down his golden cage, and in its place she was designing a future with an unshockable foundation, a foundation that was entirely her own. And so the story of Ililana reminds us that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. She proved that true strength is not about shouting the loudest, but about knowing the ground of your own worth. Marcus Thorne built his empire on arrogance and theft, and it crumbled like sand. Ililana built her new world on talent, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of self-respect. Her victory was not just in taking back her power, but in redesigning her entire life on her own terms.